Welcome to the Better Buildings, Better Society podcast. Twice a month, we interview interesting individuals and get insight into what they think makes building better members of society. Subscribe to our podcast and share with your friends. Hi, I'm Stephen Forster, founder and principal of DMA Engineering. My passion lies in the built environment and in the mechanical systems that keep buildings running at their optimum efficiency, while at the same time provide the best possible health and comfort to their occupants. In this way, DMA is absolutely committed to making buildings better members of society. This podcast focuses on energy efficiency through the eyes and experience of building industry professionals. Together with my guest, I will lead all of us on an exploration of how to build better energy efficiency buildings, how to save our clients time and money, and offer practical advice for those interested in the built environment. Join me, a mechanical engineer, outdoor enthusiast, and green advocate as I interview guests with leading edge ideas for creating better buildings and a better society. Hello again, I'm Stephen Forster, principal of DMA Engineering. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Better Buildings, Better Society. This week we have Bryan Bowen, principal at Caddis Collaborative. He is an expert in sustainable design, net zero energy homes, and livable communities. Bryan offers a wealth of knowledge in green building design and was a lead champion during the program's pilot phase for the Okura Park Speed Skating Oval for the 2022 Olympics. So way back when all this was getting going, and trained, more importantly, I think, in passive house design and the Living Building and Community Challenge. So great to have him. We are excited to have Bryan and thrilled to explore more about how good design can make buildings better members of society. With that, it is our privilege to welcome Bryan to the show and learn more about what inspires him in the architecture industry. Welcome, Bryan. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Stephen. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me on. It's super cool. Yeah, I love that you're doing this.
Yeah, great. Thanks for really participating in this. And getting the more green voices out, as we were talking before, having the avenues just to kind of tell cool stuff that people in this industry really do. So it's great. So yeah, I know we have worked together on a project in the past, really good building envelope. It was super cool, right? Because the mechanical system got really small. We were able to do some really cool stuff with that building. So, I mean, that's the way it should be, right? A really good building envelope and a very, very light mechanical system that you can do cool stuff with is definitely the way I think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 101 that we give people, which I feel like so often is like all they need to know client-wise is like, design the house to be passively as conservation oriented as it possibly can be. Windows, doors, envelope, everything, and then supply those minimized needs with super efficient mechanical systems. And after that, like supply that already minimized energy usage and demand with on-site renewables if you can. And like, there you go. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So what kind of got you involved in the green building, right? Since 2002, you were right there with the LEED program, right? So what brought you into the green building world, if you will?
Yeah, a big part was just how I grew up. I grew up in New Mexico and in a passive solar house, and helped my dad build active hot air collectors and plumb active hot water collectors, and just lived a really conservation oriented lifestyle. That was kind of partially just like frugality, but partially just like really wonderful adaptation to the desert environment. And then when I went to college at Carnegie Mellon, I got to study under Vivian Lofness and some other folks who were really part of the beginnings of Passive House, and learned how to do all of that kind of stuff, as well as working with David Lewis, who is Urban Design Associates, and other like high design folks. So we had this really great program that mixed urban design, kind of classically beautiful architecture, publishable stuff, but also environmental things. We really felt like there was not a division between those. So you could actually do all that together. And then when I got out of school, I talked to a bunch of the greats at the time, mostly like old solar guys, and they all said, don't bother, nobody cares. They said, forget it. And it was so discouraging. But I finally found a firm in Salt Lake City and went to work for those guys and got to be the young, excited green guy there. And and then I got to work with Jamie Logan here in Boulder for 4 years or so. Really, really learned a lot there and loved working with Jamie, and then started Caddis after that. And so now you can't find a firm that doesn't say they're doing sustainable design. So that's good. That's progress, right?
It is progress, right? I mean, it's all good. The more we can get out there. I'm a little curious about this passive solar house that your dad built in New Mexico. Was it just like, was there a lot of design thought behind it, or was it kind of just like, yeah, we need safe solar, big windows, and all that? Was that kind of the impetus, or was there a lot of analysis behind that?
I'd say it was a bit of a mix. Like the home was sort of designed by my folks with a design build contractor who's a real craftsman, real artist, just really wonderful guy. Originally a civil engineer, Scotsman, and named Peter Harris, totally wonderful man. I went to work for him as an Adobe builder later on, and I discovered one main thing about Adobes, which is that they're super heavy, and you get tired when you carry them all day long. But I got good at mixing concrete and stuff. So the house itself was really elegantly designed, actually. Peter Harris did mostly Adobe homes, but this was a wood frame home. My parents advocated for additional insulation, which, in the early 70s was like going to 2x6 walls with fiberglass bat instead of 2x4 walls with nothing. And but now if you looked at the house, you would say, and it wasn't like a typical kind of old style passive solar overglazed home. It was very like well-proportioned glazing systems. So it didn't have a lot of the failings of those early passive solar pilot projects. But it was cool because basically we had this like sort of like thermostatically controlled fan that blew air through hot air collectors. And if it was cold in the house and the hot air collectors were hot, it would blow hot air in. It was really extremely straightforward. And a lot of direct gain, and just a really well-built little house. So Southwestern style architecture, of course.
Yeah, so you got that really early on, right? Hey, we can actually do stuff really cool. That's very cool that you were exposed to that early on. I think that's important.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest challenge facing your work right now? And what do you think in the 3 to 5 to 10 years? What do you think that horizon looks like?
I think it's really been interesting in the past few decades to look at what's happened in architecture, especially in terms of residential design and in terms of sustainability, right? There's been these kind of major epiphanies. Like one is like more insulation, right? Like pretty straightforward, more insulation. And another one is like tighter, less leaky. That's a pretty big epiphany that kind of happened at some point, right? Really focused on by the passive house crowd. Another one now is like how little carbon emissions can you create by building the building, right? And those are all things that have always been happening, but people's and the culture's philosophical focus has shifted over time. And so I think, some of those things, I think they get built into the DNA of the practice over the years. And so now we're looking at, how do we use as little concrete as possible? So I think all the building science stuff is really maturing and becoming super more commonly understood. And now we have builders who are easy to work with on that stuff. What I'm seeing right now as our biggest challenges, it's really I would say three things. One is my sort of little pulpit speech on land use in the West. If you live in the West or you are moving to the West, you are going to have a house that was either on old farmland or wilderness or in a town. It really, collectively, we're better off putting growth in the towns rather than expanding out forever and ever and ever. Just a basic like anti-sprawl kind of speech. So I think that's one big challenge because like getting projects to happen in these urban areas, like if you're trying to do a project in Boulder or, it's the challenge. So the hurdles are, so that's the next one is like approvals have become really difficult. So for us as a firm, if we're working on if all of the approvals slow down and permitting processes slow down to keep our 10 people working full time, instead of working on 10 projects, we're working on 50 projects, which is more scattered, slower for clients, more difficult and less efficient. And there's no benefit to it. All it is just more churning bureaucracy. That's one big challenge we're facing in a lot of different places. Some places we've seen jump to smarter building codes and smarter unified codes across counties. There's a big movement right now. And simplified urban design codes that tell you really what they're wanting you to do, and then you can just do it. And it's a much more straightforward reviewable process. And I think the third thing is really budget. It's really hard to predict for us as architects what things will cost in the future, kind of in the best circumstance, right? We were always proud of being able to design to a budget pretty well. But if your approval process is going to be either 2 months or 16 months, a year's slippage can be a change in 10% of construction costs, which all of a sudden you're over budget just due to that. But then the construction market's insane right now. So it's very difficult for us to figure out what things are going to cost. But we love partnering up with general contractors from the beginning, especially on single family home projects, because it gives us the best odds of keeping everybody, together and informed and fully coordinated. And, I think as architects, we really love hearing from the subs and the contractors because they know stuff, and the consultants know stuff. And if we can get them at the table early and hear everything they have to say, our designs are way better.
So, all right. So there are three things there that kind of unpack. So let's just, I think the land use is, I think one of the things that people don't realize with any building, right? You take something, the earth that's giving life, and then you put in a building that's just taken away, right? So that's we got to think about that. It's on a small scale, it doesn't seem like much, but you do it a lot of times, that's a lot of earth that's being removed, and it becomes a problem. And so I think even if you're going to build any building, it needs to be able to give back, right? So I think that's in whatever, if we can make net zero or net positive buildings, right, we're actually giving back. And
that brings up regenerative design and living building challenge, living community challenge. And that I think is one of the next phases you're leaning into there.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think we got to think about buildings not as an object, but something that's actually that's living, right? We're interacting with it every day, and the environment is interacting with it every day. And so we need to be aware of that, right? We're having an impact. So I think that's one thing. So the approval process is approvals and budget, right? God, geez, the bane of our existence. It's just
so easy if it wasn't such a problem, right?
Right. You brought up the unified building codes, and I think that there's some interest there. And if we were to just on single family residence, I don't know, it may be too idealistic, but just to say, if we were to have all right, if it's a passive house home, right, and it's going to meet the passive house standard, it's going to check all these boxes, and then it could go through a different approval type process would be so I think ways that can make it easier to happen for certain things to do that the industry's kind of doing on its own, right? So the industry's trying to be responsible when you're going to a certain passive house standard. Is that kind of where you were alluded to in that comments? Having some stuff that can maybe bypass some of the county requirements.
Yeah, and I think that giving essentially preferential treatment for the thing that your government has decided and the people have ideally decided as preferred, right? So if you really want to see something happen, you should make it easier to do that thing as opposed to making it harder. And I think, a lot of our jurisdictions will say, oh, it's our highest priority is workforce housing or affordable housing or sustainability. And then the next thing that comes out of their mouths is, and here's the additional set of rules that you have to follow to do those things and more review processes. So instantaneously becomes harder to do the thing than that they're actually trying to encourage you to do. And that's really tricky. It really should flip and say okay, well, if we think we want, net zero passive house, regenerative design, affordable housing, whatever we're wanting to encourage as a region in the Colorado, how do we get that to happen faster, more easily, more prescriptively, and then we'll get more of it.
Yeah, I do. I know Golden here was flirting around with trying to take into account the passive house and kind of doing something similar with that. I don't think it's gone that far. I think it's fallen for it. But I think there should be more that happens just to encourage that stuff. I think that's a great point. And the budget, the budget of things anymore, pricing changes so much. Anytime we do a forecast anymore, we're like, hey, these prices could change fast, quick. It's just one of those things that I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that actually will straighten out, just with what's going on in the world and how things are moving and the supply chain issues that happen all the time. So I don't know what's going to happen with the budget. I think that's going to be a moving target for a long time. I don't know if it's going to stall projects. Have you seen it stalling projects or people walking away from a lot of projects?
Yeah, just as a business person in this industry for so long, I'm always kind of looking for warning signs. And, one warning sign for sure is when clients make different decisions about what they're going to do based on price. not the normal stuff, but like, I'm not going to build it, or I'm going to sell this property, or I'm not going to do a new home. I'm just going to like do a little addition to the existing home. Or, we've got a client right now that had designed a pretty straightforward, like, around 2,200 square foot, passive house level, pretty heavy duty remodel in the county, Boulder County. And, pricing has gone up while we waited for the approvals process, to the extent that they are going to redesign. And so we're now going to be doing, instead of a 2,200 square foot single family home, it'll be like 1,700 square feet, and that's, I'm not, saying that that's a tragic thing in a lot of ways, but they are making different decisions based on it. And so, in terms of like the input to the regional construction economy, it's 2/3 of what it would have been, right? So if everybody's making decisions like that, then all of a sudden all that demand pressure that we think is there starts to turn into different things, and we might find ourselves in a pretty heavy duty correction at some point. Because if those decisions are happening at the individual scale, what's happening at a business scale of home builders and developers, institutional builders.
Right. Did that particular client still stay with the passive house standard? They didn't go down on the green standard?
They did not. I was really delighted. I mean, they basically said, like, look, we're going to stick with all that green stuff you sold us on. We're into it. And we're, the things that are going where there's like a roof deck and some balconies and some square footage and, the, exercise room and some stuff like that they don't have to have, but they're sticking with like passive house.
Yeah, that's got to feel good, right? I mean, that's a great client right there.
It is great. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do most people misunderstand about architecture? There's a lot to unpack in that one, right? I think a lot of people just don't really know what we do at all. So, I mean, one thing, like as a result of the Marshall Fire, we get a lot of phone calls from some new folks, and they didn't opt into this. They are kind of stuck dealing with this problem that they're facing, and so they haven't spent a lot of time thinking about building a home or what we all do. And so some of them are really having a hard time figuring out, like, well, what does the architect do? And like, why do you have other engineers? Aren't you the architect? And like, well, no, we have different specializations. So like mechanical engineers are doing a great job at the thing that they're doing, and structural engineers are doing a great job at the thing that they're doing. We're the architects. We're doing a great job at the thing we're doing. And none of us are general contractors. You got to have a general contractor unless you do a design build. So really just getting people oriented has been a big effort there, which is exposed to me, I think, a lot of things that people don't know about our profession, which is fine. I think another thing that, we're always trying to shed some of the bad rap that architects get, and a lot of our work is referred to us by general contractors. They'll get the initial contact from a client and say, hey, Caddis is a great outfit to work with, because I think we understand construction. We're pretty service oriented in terms of working with the overall process, with the consultants, with the contractors and subs, and with the clients. And it's really not about us. It's like not an ego thing here. Some firms definitely are. Every new client's project for us is not like a chance for us to hone our next, concept. It's a chance for us to figure out really cleverly how to suit their site and their needs and their microclimates. And that's super exciting work to me. I think that's cool. I don't really care about like what my next aesthetic foray is supposed to be on some kind of imaginary arc. But everyone here is also like, it's a very collaborative environment. We've got 10 folks kicking around the office behind me here. And, we're just always throwing stuff out on this big table and talking it through, and all the good ideas rise to the surface. And so I think dispelling the, architect as egomaniac myth is something we sort of strive to. But also other architects at the same time are doubling down on that. So it's like a bit of a mixed bag. And I think the other thing is like, how much work goes into it. You look at a final set of drawings and it's like, oh, okay, so you got 50 pages of drawings, and well, how long can it possibly take to sit down and draw 50 pages? Well, it's not really like, that's not really the work. The work is like all the stuff that leads up to those 50 pages being like a really refined, clear set of instructions that builders can use to construct something that costs millions of dollars, so some folks seem to really value what we're doing, and other people, really just focused on like, how cheap can we get this set of drawings? And they don't know that, you kind of lose out on
potentially lose out on quality when you do that.
Right. And so what's your favorite type of design? Is it design build or plan build or design plan spec, or is it kind of a design build process? Do you have one, or what's the merits between the two?
Yeah, we do it all. I think, really we try to avoid competitive bidding projects because really when you kind of think about it, it's like a dishonesty competition. Who's going to tell you the nicest things to get the price to be the lowest? And then they look like, oh, that's the lowest price. That's great. We'll pick them. And then you have the biggest problem. So, and also I think there is a bit of a myth about general contractors that they're sort of just like making up the price. Like they're not actually in control of what things cost. They're assembling costs together to create a picture of what the thing that we designed is going to cost. They're not just sort of like saying like, oh, I'll do it for 1.5 million. And somebody else says, I'll do it for 1.2. It's not really like that. So we love having a general contractor on board from the beginning. We've done some true design build format work, and that's been great to be really hired by the general contractor, be under them, managed by them all the way through, and provide our services. That's been great. We don't have a construction branch internally here at Caddis, but there's talk of that. But we really like working with a bunch of different contractors, so we don't really want to do that. But really, regardless of what we're doing, we try to get the general contractor on board from like day one, and pinging ideas back and forth. And we find that the outcomes are better in the end for the clients if you use that kind of a format. I mean, it's the sort of whole integrated design team approach, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think when I look at our most successful projects, it's always been when the team has been assembled earliest, right? I mean, I always like to see a team on our end with, have a mechanical contractor involved when we release our DD drawings, right? 100% DD drawings. That's when, we've laid out the big ideas and let's have somebody else. Let's start an open conversation about that versus wait until the end. Then you do the kiss of death, value engineering. Oh, I hate that word. It
just is the worst. Totally. And it just means you've gone down some other road and you're just trying to get back to this other path desperately. Where if you have the right people together, you just go down the right road from the beginning. Like it just doesn't, like the value engineering is like a correction for a mistake you made long before in your team structure for the most part. I mean, we do end up with like some needs to like a project I just mentioned, right? Like they've 18 months behind in their construction schedule because of approvals. And times have changed in the last 18 months. So they're redesigning to make that work. That's, pretty real world example of like when you need to do something like that. Right. And it's not because we didn't have a clue about what things were going to cost. We were actually on budget,
Yeah. And I think the other thing, is I'm learning a lot more about, all the green building stuff, the passive house standards and all the details that go into making that standard, to have those open conversations so you don't design a detail, it gets out there in the contract because there's just no way I could ever build that, right? We can, engineers, designers, architects, we all get in our minds about something, right? Sometimes, and having that sounding board of like, well, hey, if we were to actually do it like this, I could do it like this. And have you heard about this material? And then we could do it like, just those bouncing ideas around and actually how it can be constructed in the field makes it so it doesn't show up in the field and the guy's going, I don't know how to do this. Then what do? Well, I'm frustrated with it. I'm not going to do it. And then they skip it, or, they take a shortcut and the intent is lost. I think we see that too much. And I don't know how to, it's all got to be collaborative for us. And I think, it's right in your name, Caddis Collaborative, right? So
it is, yeah, exactly. We're trying to communicate something with that for sure. And I think, that's one of the reasons we've been doing some like passive house trainings with our staff here that are not like just on how to use WFI models or energy modeling systems, but how to like install window tape, how to like with our like actually construction oriented workshops. Because I think there's something that's like really important about how your hands and your brain work together in terms of design. Also, there's things like, I was joking with someone here this morning about it, like it's really easy for us in a drawing to say, well, here's the window flashing line. And like just to say, oh, it needs to be a little longer. So I make it a couple inches longer. Well, if it's like a 6-inch roll of tape or 8-inch roll of tape, like you can't just like make it longer sideways. It's either 6 or 8. I mean, it's got a number to it, right? And it's like how often do we really measure that? I was like, oh, that's tricky, but it's a real thing, and what happens to the corners? Does it get all messed up in there? Like, I think it's just important for us to understand how that stuff all goes together physically. We've also scheduled 2 Caddis work days this summer for volunteering to help build Habitat for Humanity projects here locally. We've done a bunch of design work with those guys, and so we'll be helping them build kind of whatever they're building at that time. But we also did a big, kind of net zero ready trailer park rehab project for the Ponderosa trailer park here in Boulder. And so that's been pretty cool because it's like, 68, 72, somewhere in that range. Conversions from, existing trailers to, like, once homeowners want to opt into the Habitat program, then they can get a Habitat home built there. And so it's really like as much up to them as it can possibly be. But, with like tons of building science, Habitat's hip to this stuff.
For sure. They want to build buildings that are going to be around for the longest time, right? I mean, that's building resiliency that way. So,
and low cost of ownership is a really important part of affordability. So, like, both on energy consumption side and on the maintenance side, right? Both of those things. Like, if you design a high maintenance energy hog of a building, you're not doing anybody favors on that. So.
Yeah, you actually make the problem worse, right? Because now they don't ever, right? Cost is going one way. They don't ever have a way to spend costs and other things that are going to make their lives better. So it's a double edge, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
What would you have known? If you go back in time, taking all the knowledge that you have today, what would you have liked to know now that you knew then? You know what I'm saying? It's like chicken and egg thing. It's like, back then we were doing this or whatever.
That it was going to work out and not to worry so much. That's the business owner part of me for sure. But the architect part of me is also, that I probably would say, we always put forward that we were, really focused on doing energy efficient and green building oriented design work. And I think in some ways we probably could have been stronger in coming out as that. And then, maybe radiating that more out into the world. But I feel like we've done a really good job of that particular thing anyways. That's a great question, Stephen. I'm not sure if I know a great answer for it.
Well, and I think just like we worry as business owners, we worry so much about the business and then about the green stuff, right? And it's not as big as market as one would like, right? It is still a pretty small market in the things that we talk about. It's not like is more people hear about LEED and all those things. They think that's what it is. And kind of the work, the work when we're bringing all these new technologies and all these different ways of doing stuff to the table, we're really pushing people. The whole industry is being pushed. And I think a lot of people just think, oh, you do green. You're like, yeah. And they don't really understand exactly what that all means on the nuts and bolts of it all. And what we're actually trying to, not to achieve, but what we're trying to put out there in the world with our work. I think it's still a challenge. It's still, like we were talking before, the more voices we have in the industry is going to be better for the industry overall. So.
Absolutely. I think we still do battle with like some clients who feel like all the stuff that we talk about on energy efficiency is just like all in the nice to have column at best, or like even worse, they're just like, I guess I'll, kind of indulge this architect for a bit on this stuff. And then, I don't really take it too seriously. So that can be a bit of a letdown if that's the path we're on. But we've gotten, passive house level multifamily built in Moab, and we've got one up in Nova Scotia right now. And, so I really feel like we're at a place where we can show this stuff's, it's really beginning, it's more mainstream all the time and more, legitimized all the time. And I think ironically, like the increasing energy codes has kind of eroded some of our market because there's sort of a mindset of like, oh, we've got new stiffer energy codes. That must be enough. So we should just do the minimum. And I'm like, well, it's mostly not enough. Or enough for what, I guess is the question.
Right. And even the minimum is, I always think of it as like, do you really want to just be the minimum? You know what I mean?
Totally. It's like the barely legal scenario. Like you just don't want to be like one further step and you're illegal. Like, okay, great.
Yeah.
I actually would really be like, we frame this stuff to our clients and there's like, a couple different like tipping points in terms of decisions, in the design process, in terms of sustainability, and those are all tied to budgetary decisions as well. But most of our clients, at the end of the day, will make decisions about flooring that have a greater magnitude impact on the budget than anything else. You're doing a 3,000 square foot house, and they choose between $10 square foot flooring and $30 square foot flooring. All of a sudden, $20 a square foot, across 3,000 square feet just was like, and that's money you could spend on insulation or, air tightness.
When speaking to building occupants, what do they tell you is important in their building? I mean, when you're having those conversations, and what have you learned from that? It's changed the way you go about the design.
Yeah. I mean, as Americans and just Western culture in general, we're such consumer-focused people, and we want to buy things. So we tend to want to talk about things. I want this many sinks, or I want that many square feet, or I want this sort of thing. And if you go with that, you end up with generally like a big, long laundry list of things that's more than fits in a budget. So we try to get that out of our hair. We get the clients to talk about that, so they've expressed all that stuff to us. But then we really try to reset the conversation about experiences. Like, what are the experiences that you want to have in this home? Like, do you love to wake up in the morning to the sound of birds and the sun hitting the wall in front of you with dappled light from the tree waving in the breeze? Like, is that what we're talking about here? Or are you really focused on I have sleep problems, I got to have a darked out bedroom? Are you a morning person? You want to go outside on the patio in front of your kitchen and have tea in front of the view that faces west or east, right, or south. Talking about the experiences allows us to typically come in with a design that's more compact than what the clients had guessed. So it's pretty common for us to say, for designs to come in, 10, 15, 25% smaller than what the clients think they need to get, because they've toured other homes and they're like, oh yeah, well the 3,000 square foot one, or the 5,000 square foot one, that felt like it had all the things that I wanted in it. But then when you kind of strip that back and get to experiences, it's a different conversation.
Yeah, and this is a very interesting conversation, because my girlfriend and I, wife, whatever, we have this conversation a lot, because she's all about experiences, right? She cares very little about things, right? And I'm kind of right in the middle. I straddle the things thing. I'm like, these things can help the experience, right? Enhance the experience. So she's definitely more about experiences, doesn't care about anything really materialistic. She wants the experiences. And so I'm a little bit in the middle. So that's in it. And I think that's a great way to look at it, because it truly is. What experience do you want? I mean, you can't have both all the time, right? I mean, it's too difficult. So there has to be the trade-off. So what experience do you want in the home? I think that's very cool. I think that's kind of refreshing to hear somebody say, what's the experience you want in the home, right? I mean, I think that's a great way to look at it. So yeah, that's cool. So what are you currently researching or has struck your curiosity?
This is an interesting time in terms of, one thing is still the cost upheaval, right? So when that happens, a lot of things have to get thought out. What's the most pragmatic approach for X has a lot to do with, the cost of doing that thing. And so if the costs are in turmoil, then some decisions have to be rethought. There's also such a rapid change on the production and material side of things, what window manufacturers are doing. There's kind of constant research on okay, who's doing what now, and can we get this thing that way? And so there's products and materials research, and windows and stuff. There's probably windows are the biggest part of it, but also siding and insulation are really big areas of change right now. And I think products that are focused on creating clearly thought out vapor barriers and air barriers and drainage planes in buildings are really important too. And I think that's a place where I'm really interested to see how the trades start to adapt to that, because you can spend a lot of time, carefully crafting one of those membranes and then punch a whole bunch of holes in it, not thinking too hard about it. So that and modular, we did a ton of modular homes in the before the 2008 crash. And all the modular companies that lived in Colorado that time evaporated in the next couple of years. So they were all gone, and now they're coming back. But new ones are being born, right? So Be Public and other folks like that are doing some really, really cool stuff. Whether modular is going to scale up again fast enough that everyone can start to really use it as a resource is a really interesting question. Because, having everybody go to the site to build a building, just that's pretty clearly like not the most efficient way of doing things. Like we don't do that with cars. Like nobody comes to your house to build you a car. So I guess cars are pretty mobile though.
Right. And I guess on the modular side of things, do you think we'll see more modular type construction going forward, or do you think it's just going to be kind of still a little bit of a niche area? And I mean, the modular is now down just to wall sections, floor sections, right? I think that's what Be Public is doing, right? They do wall sections and they bring it in versus bringing in a block, right? I think there's still different ways of just like building blocks and stacking them. So I think. I mean, we've looked at a couple of modular projects in providing the engineering support on it. None have moved forward yet, and it's just it. I mean, and we were talking with another architecture firm about what they thought the modular was going to be. So, and I don't know where it's going. I mean, I think there's multiple sides of a factory work type thing versus out in the field type work thing, and I think there's some stuff there, and I don't know where it'll all go. And from an architect standpoint, do you feel that the modular is too constraining in the design world, or do you think there's still enough flexibility built in there to bring about a very architectural pleasing building that's just not blocky?
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything we do has got so many constraints on it that I'm sort of immune to how many there are. We just work within, we try to make some clever solutions that are going to adapt to all the constraints that we've got. Modular does, I mean, if we're in the panelizing world, like we've done everything from like just framing panelization, and that's shipped to the site. We did that with Habitat a bunch of years ago and a bunch of other projects. We've done full box modular where the boxes are brought to the site nearly finished and stitched together. That's been one other model. And then, where the other models where the planes of the buildings, like the, wall assemblies and floor assemblies and roof assemblies have been brought, like you were talking about. Be Public or, Phoenix House, people like that doing different varieties of those things. They all have their strengths and weaknesses for sure. And I think there's a bunch of factors that kick into it, shipping distances and where the factory is relationship to what kind of market is there. We're really interested in trying to do as much modular as we can on affordable housing projects and multifamily, because if they can, that's a project type where there's often quite a bit of repetition anyways. So repetition feeds success in the modular world. Even in things as simple as like you just have a stack of the same stuff that you're using all the time, or framing tables that are set up for a wall pattern that you can use 12 times instead of 2 times. Pretty straightforward mechanics. So I think there's a lot of like really interesting benefits to it. Building in a controlled environment certainly is one. And I think we'll never get to the point where it's all that. There's always going to be, I think, a place for field construction. Yeah, I mean, in terms of sustainability too, you get such better, waste reduction and recycling rates from modular too, in addition to potential quality improvements. That's another big asset.
Yeah, I think from just a material standpoint, the factory type modular construction definitely offers more there in waste, right? Because when I was framing houses, all the wood we'd call out, right? It would all end up being used at bracing at some point, right? And then a lot of it did at the end of the day would twist, and we couldn't even use it for back out blocking or whatever, and we ended up throwing it away, and going into the dumpster at some point. And there's a fair bit that would go into the bin with that. So, I'm on kind of both sides of it. I think, I don't know. I haven't made my opinion up on it. I think there's a place and a time for it. I think, we're looking at a house in Glenwood, and we may do something like that as well. I'm still haven't figured out what I'm going to do. And I think the other thing you mentioned was the tradespeople and how not to penetrate a membrane, right? And Emu here in town is big on this certified passive house tradesperson, right? And so I don't know, do we end up putting on our specs that, they have to have a certified passive house trade person on your staff that's going to be supervising? There's that way we can drive it as well, but does that drive cost up by having that requirement in our specifications? I don't, it's interesting.
It's tough because the way we build right now, it's just, there's a very different group of folks out there all the time at different phases of the project. And, it's, if you could justify, full-time site superintendent who's also the air boss or the person who's, the captain of the passive house team, that job, maybe there's some good overlap there, but, construction defects and craftsmanship are real concerns in the world these days. We have a lot less skilled labor available in the construction world, and so that creates an opportunity for unskilled people to be operating in an environment that should be people who know what they're doing, and architects and engineers, we don't get paid enough to stand out there the entire time and make sure everything is done exactly right. That's a real fallacy. We can't control the builder. You have to have a good builder because they're building it. It's their thing. But so I think there's definitely a cost to those things. It's pretty tricky. I think it's also for us, it impacts design too. If we're trying to do we have 2 projects right now that are Marshall Fire burn replacement projects, and they underinsured a little bit, and they really have a lot of pressure on them to build the simplest, most energy efficient house possible. And so that's a rectangle, that faces the right way. And, and the more you create convoluted building forms, the more you complicate that job of air sealing and where's your vapor barrier and how's the water going to stay out of there. And so, there's plenty of beautiful, simple buildings out there. It's just a question of does your architect have the skillfulness to get it to that, to be that, and really relying on materiality proportions and shapes and fenestration patterns? Or are they really relying on how many dormers do I stick on this thing to kind of cover up that it's a big dumb shaped building?
Well, yeah. And we work on fairly large luxury residential homes, and just the way those homes are constructed and how, I think to make those homes is extremely energy efficient. You really have to just kind of go back to just a steel skeleton, and everything else hangs off of it. And then you can just, everything's non-structural. You got a structural element, but everything hangs off it. It's more like a commercial curtain wall type assembly. Then you can start flashing it, and you can do all this stuff and have the overframes where you don't need it. And I think that, I just see huge challenges in that industry to make those, to take it to that next level and do it and make the buildings the way they want them to look. So that's it's a whole mind shift, right? It's a mind shift that we're looking for to happen. So
yeah, we just got hired a couple of days ago to do some energy advising, I'll say, on a large single family custom home up in the mountains, and it's 18,000 square feet in this house. And so my first tongue-in-cheek reaction was well, you got to build half of it or a quarter of it. They were all right, fine, fair. Okay, but now that we're going to build 18,000 square feet, what do we do? So, and buildings like that it's a beautiful building. It'll be very cool. Good legacy home for this person's family. But it's hard to at any level of energy savings saying you're really authentically hitting a energy efficiency metric that's you're spending energy. You just got to face that.
Yeah. I think that's key, right? You're going to be spending energy no matter what, but let's minimize it as much as we can. That's the way, that's always our approach. Let's make it energy efficient as best. And I always go back to what the passive house standards and all the other standards say is we're trying to build resiliency into the building, right? Let's not, it can be great looking, but it can't, it may not be functional to operate, may cost too much to operate down the line. You may have mold issues, you can have condensation issues. Let's eliminate all those issues and make it the best house that we can, the most energy efficient house that we can, and just go forward from there. So like you said, they're going to build it, right? They're going to build 18,000 square feet.
It's going to happen. A lot of the work that we do is co-housing, right? And so we do, projects that are like 18, 24, 36 homes, where they share a lot of stuff and the units become much smaller. And so the vision that the people who live in co-housing have for their world is like a collective shared life. And so the mission behind that is very different. So that's a place where it's easy for us to say, like, okay, in order to make your project's budget work, and to create really wonderful urban spaces, like we're going to have really beautiful, simple buildings that are going to be lasting for a long, long time. Because we see ourselves like not so much as building a house at a time, but we're like as part of an engaged group of folks who are building the cities, building the world. We're building the world as architects and engineers and contractors, right? So take that seriously and have a long view of it. And so, what that individual structure does to contribute to society, like you said in the intro, like, where do we sit in that? Is it just going to sap resources and sort of take, or is it really going to contribute somehow? And, and that can be quantified in terms of energy, or really like doing a net positive project. But also in terms of like, how does it relate to the street? When neighboring residents walk by it, do they feel like, oh, I live in a wonderful city? Or are they like, that project? And, one of our projects is in Houston right now. It's going to be a beautiful co-housing project. And it's like really well designed, and we're working with a wonderful local architect there. And, but you look around Houston, and it really is like a strong argument for strong planning rules. You're kind of like, oh gosh, like some of the multifamily stuff that's happening there is really brutally bad. And, but it's also like a laboratory for like, in what ways can urban projects be bad? Like, oh, that's a new way. I hadn't even thought of that one yet. And
that's really make it.
Exactly. Well, that's super horrible. I didn't know you could do that. So some of the basic, like, new urbanist and urban design things, I think really are super important to city making and how we see things.
Seth Godin had a great one. He said, when a city is built, and that you lay out the roads, you actually are creating the operating system for the city, right? Yep. And when you really think about it, that starts setting, the constraints. And now we have to build in those constraints and how we interact with those constraints and how do the buildings fit in there, and where do we put office buildings? Where do we put those type of things, and how we interact with those places, I think is really, I think once you look at it as an operating system in our new technological minds, right? It's like, wow, that's really true, right? I mean, the infrastructure really lays down a certain basis of how we're going to interact with the whole thing. So
yeah, and from a climate change perspective, it's massive, because it if cars and transport are creating, and housing, right, are creating a just gigantic amount of carbon emissions. I mean, buildings alone are like 45-50%, right? And transportation is a really big chunk. Then, what if you could like live in a city in a way that was like more walkable, and you could get your needs met with transit and bikes and walking around, and like, oh, but we designed these cities with gigantic blocks, gigantic roads, and we separated all the uses. We put like all your stores over there and all your houses way over here, and the schools way off over there. So the only way you can get to those things is you must own a car. That's the only way. It's a cost of entry to live in our town, is to drive all over the place. Whereas like when I talk to groups of co-housers, right, who are the market, this is the market of what people are trying to be, developers are trying to sell to. And you ask them, you don't ask the people who are speculating, the realtors and developers of the world and architects. You ask the actual people who are going to live in a neighborhood. What they care about the most is like really great spaces they care about having a beautiful, luxurious, like nice interior that's private. They care about having really wonderful outdoor spaces that are shared, the places outside of our homes that we walk out into, right? The street frontages and the plazas and the courtyards. And they want to be able to walk to coffee shops and, and hop on the bus. They don't really, they want to live in a little like kind of cute scale urban village environment. A lot of people do. And I would say like way more people want that. I mean, first off, then they're aware of it. But second off, because it's such a rare thing, but it's also like, it's just not that available. So if I want to buy a house in Boulder, like 85% of our land is used for single family ranch houses. So it's probably going to be something like that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunities in the future for just as we move forward on how we can change how we build things. I think another big part of it is we're too far removed from food, right? We don't.
Sure.
A lot of people don't know how their food is grown. They have no idea what goes on with the food. And I think if we can bring that a little bit closer, I think there would be a lot more like, oh, right. I think, yeah, I think so. I think food's another big part of the equation that gets missed a lot too. So I think there's a lot that can be done there. So yeah, it's cool. So I mean, our next one is like, how will climate change affect your work? You kind of brought up the urban sprawl, and I think it kind of maybe a little bit more elaboration on what you think will be the biggest hurdle with climate change going, in the built environment.
Well, there's all the different aspects. I think, one is, what do the buildings actually have to endure? Are they going to need to endure brush fires, or are they going to need to endure different temperature ranges? Are they going to need to endure longer lapses in power availability? Are they going to need to get off of gas to avoid systems that when they light on fire and stuff? And are they going to be exposed to a lot more rainwater than normal? So there's a basic resiliency part of it too, but it's just like buildings have got to get a little tougher. You kind of can't get away with some of the stuff you got away with before. I think that's a big piece of it. I think how we design, it's really interesting. I think all these things are happening at the same time. Some homes are getting bigger, more audacious, more consumptive, right? At the same time, and others are getting more compact and more, co-located with others and around shared amenities and in urban infrastructures that are like low carbon emissions. Politically, man, I just do not know where we're headed. I think if you took all the great stuff that's been said in this last election about where we're heading climate change wise, and you implemented it all, we'd be great. We'd be in really good shape. Right now, I don't think we're implementing all those things, right? So, especially with war happening, that's screwing up our oil supplies and stuff like that. So, how seriously are politicians going to take that stuff and lead the way? Open question.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I just read an article this morning about how Germany's economy would, if they were to shut off the natural gas from Russia, they would end up in a 5% reduction in their GDP, and it would lead to a recession. And I'm like, well, I mean, can we do? I mean, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here, but I think, what I mean? Maybe there's opportunity that you just need to say, all right, we got to accelerate our plan here really quick just to get rid of some of this geopolitical stuff and be more resilient. So I think there's ways to build resiliency into it. I think on the weather side of it, right? Portland, Oregon hit 115 degrees, right? Last summer. That's just crazy. When we saw that here, the standard factor of safety on cooling is 1.15. We've increased it to 1.25 as our standard here. We feel that will keep what we were designing around in Colorado, the Front Range area, to be fairly well for a while. We can handle those extremes, but I mean, is it going to come to a point where 1.25 isn't it? You know what I mean? If you're looking at just basic weather data, is that not enough? I don't know, but we personally have reacted to that by just 1.25 on the cooling load, just to build in a little bit more. Engineers, we can go overboard and add a little bit more factor safety, and then things get bigger, then they're overpriced, and so it's a slippery slope. I mean, it's definitely one of those things. I think it all comes back to the envelope. If you make a really good envelope, and you go the difference between 1.15 and 1.25 is minimal, right? We're not going to have a huge impact. It's just a little bit there that we're designing into. So I think it's better in the envelope. So
I think you're right. I think, and also then the risk factors are a lot smaller, right? If the temperature, if the building is confronted with a more of a load than it's designed to take by more than that set safety factor, the bad thing that happens is a lot less bad, right? You're not going to freeze. You're not it's actually going to be okay, so it was 64 inside instead of 70. That was fine. It's just not, that's okay. Whereas 78 instead of, 72, okay, we can survive that instead of it being really a problem for people's habitation. We're doing a project outside of Seattle right now too, another co-housing project there called Rooted Northwest. And that's going to be a great project. It's a back to the land kind of agricultural based permaculture co-housing project that wants to go strongly into good energy performance land, and they also, they had the big crazy heat dome effect happening there too. So they're all really clear, like they've got personal live experience from the last year or two of whew, that was real. So I don't have to tell them it's a projection. They're they're on board. In fact, they're always pointing the finger at me saying you're going to do energy efficient design, right? I'm like, yes, that's why you hired me. It's what we do. I didn't forget last week. It's okay. You don't have to keep telling me, but it's okay. Yeah,
it's just right there in the front.
I got it.
There, right on their
totally.
Forehead. Right?
We're doing it. Yeah.
So if you had extra money on a project, how would you recommend a client use it?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. I mean, I guess it depends on where they're at, but if you're talking about energy efficiency, if you have one more dollar, it's almost always better spent on insulation than anything else. But once you're done with that, then it's probably better spent on windows. And once you're done with that, it's probably better spent on the mechanical system. And once you've done all those things, then it's great to spend it on renewables. But back to the experience part of it, I think, let's take nano walls or the big operable wall systems that a lot of people really like now. I mean, every client we've had for a number of years has wanted to have something like that in the home, and they're really cool. But they're also as a thing, they show up as fairly expensive, and they can be pretty expensive on the energy side too if you don't attend to ones that are well air sealed and proper glazing and low maintenance. But it's kind of the analogy I give people is it's like the gem on your ring, on your wedding ring. You don't look at that stone and say we should value engineer that off. That's way out of line with the other per square millimeter costs on your wedding ring. We should definitely VE that thing out of there. No, it's why the ring's there. It holds that thing. It's cool. So make the house like that. Make it hold the experience that you want to have, and put your energy and your money into that. And then understand where you're putting it, but don't do it accidentally, right? You got to there's an intentionality to it that I think is really important. Knowing where you're spending your money and energy, and then putting it on what you care about.
So, just as a follow up to that question, I think I'm gonna answer it. Okay. I just want you to correct me where I'm wrong. So, what advice would you give someone just starting to consider building a building or purchasing a new building? And I think your answer is going to be, what's the experience you want from that building? Would you say that's fair?
No, my first answer is don't do it. It's a headache. Okay, that's probably not the best first answer. But yeah, I think really you figuring out what you're trying to accomplish in terms of experience and function, really getting clear on that. And the old word priority was a singular word. It wasn't priorities. It's, if you go back to the original source of it, because you really how American is that to have everything is a priority. It's all priorities. Everything I own is a priority. You really just need to be able to say no, this is what the house is about. This is a courtyard house about indoor outdoor living right here, or this is a house that's about me aging in place and being able to have a place for my daughter and son-in-law to come and live with me. And then when I'm gone there, the kids will take over my part of the house. What's the house about? Focusing on the essential. It's a great book called Essentialism, which is really good for getting your mind honed on figuring out what's important and why you do things different times.
Okay, cool. We'll put that in the show notes. I think that's important.
Cool.
So what's an example of a design mistake or failure that you experienced, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I mean, there's a whole world of water intrusion, and that's the biggest lesson is to keep it simple, stupid, and also just know what you're, what you're relying on to happen where. It's sort of Joe Stiebrick's perfect wall system, and you gotta where is the drainage plane? Where is the vapor barrier? What do you how is that continuous? So that's, I think, some really important stuff. I think, other things are impacts of value engineering. When you have a system that's been designed to be coherent and logical and make sense and all integrated, and then you cut one bit out, does it still hold together? Does it still write, or is it actually going to fail? And we've seen projects where like all of a sudden, we lost the ERVs and now we have humidity spiking. We have some stuff like that where, you saved some money on each, on something, but you cause yourself this huge problem down the line.
I agree. I disagree with the value engineering. Every time I hear, hey, we got a value engineer, I go, now we're just all about compromises, right? Where's the biggest compromises coming? And we had a great design and now we got to go mess up a great design.
Totally. Well, and the thing that sticks out is the thing that you've put your most energy into, right? So like if you've thought it through and you're like, okay, here's where I want to put my money and my values in this house, or in that indoor-outdoor experience, or in satisfying passive house, or in, the great cooking experience of this kitchen, or whatever that is about, well, that thing is going to show up as the most expensive thing. So, but it's the thing you care about the most. So like logically, value engineering draws a correlation between like the thing you care about the most and the thing that they suggest you should get rid of first. And like, that's like the total wrong approach, right? Like, when you find that point where you're, over budget on something, you got to like step back and say like, okay, so big picture wise, like, how do we, not throw this whole thing out, but like rethink it so it's a coordinated, coherent thought process. And, sometimes I'm like, well, we've got an allowance for $30 a square foot for flooring. What if you spent 10? That's, or your appliance package doesn't need to be this, it could be that.
Yeah. And I think knowing that, we talked about it earlier on, but knowing that earlier versus later, right? Always having those conversations earlier before hey, here's the permit package, we're ready to go. Always knowing that before, as best as you can, right? It's like after the approval process, it's kind of out of our hands, but so.
Totally, yeah.
So what is your favorite building and why?
Whew. That's tough. I should have read these questions before I did the interview.
Did we? You did. Okay.
I think, you sent a bunch of them. So it's my favorite building and why. Man, that's definitely super challenging. And I can hear people, like the rest of my office is like chuckling at me in the background because they're like, oh, he's really got Bryan now. Like this guy. Bryan's got no idea what to say. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I know I don't have a good answer for that.
That's fine. Fair enough. What is your favorite place and why?
Oh, my favorite place. I'm a desert kid, so I love the, just the raw brutality of the desert and solitude. And those are great places, but I also really love and cherish like, wonderful little urban environments too. So, if I flip around to like something really close at hand, like, I love like little intimate spaces in some of the downtown areas of Boulder, like, like the Spruce Confections courtyard, right? That Wolf Lion designed. It's a really gentle, sweet little urban space. And I think those things, it's like less about architecture and more about the experience.
Yeah. So on the desert, right? There's, for people that aren't familiar with the Southwest, it's not all like one type of desert. There is different deserts. And it's a lot different desert. You go up in elevation a little bit and it will change. You go down in elevation or in a canyon, it changes. So that's the interesting. It's not all one thing. It's just very interesting how it changes around.
Totally. And super engaging. My better answer is probably like my favorite place is outside.
Outside in nature, outside. Right? Yeah, exactly. Just outside. All right, cool. Yeah. So for someone listening and they'd like to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, our website is caddispc.com. Or you can Google Caddis Collaborative, Bryan Bowen, or any of us here. And it'll pop up and there's a info button. You can email us there or call us on the phone or whatever. Or we've got, Facebook pages and Instagram and all the things. So it's pretty easy to find out what we're all about. And like one thing I think that's like really, I tell every potential client, and I think this is a good mindset for you to take, you, the people who maybe the 1 or 5 people who listen to this eventually, who haven't already turned it off, are like, oh, God. The stalwart
we'll move
listeners.
this forward.
Exactly. Yeah. But at the beginning, I think, one thing I try to like say to each client is like, for any architect, but for us for sure, is like the work of the past doesn't necessarily dictate the work of the future. I mean, just because you like look at our website and it looks a certain way, those are the projects we've done. They're not the projects that we're going to do. So, and for us, our ethic is like doing projects for a specific client on a specific site at a specific sort of time and place. And so every project looks new and, like at least a new idea. And now my dog's barking in the background.
That's fine.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, man, we got to go for a walk.
Yeah. He's like, the dogs are walking outside and it's just too much for him to tolerate. But yeah, I think, the other thing about that is that we want our clients to feel like the project that we did for them is the best work we've ever done.
Very good. Well, I really thank you for participating on this. It was a fun conversation. I think, there's a lot of great little nuggets. I really like, what experience do you want with the home? I think that is kind of the key, right? It's not what do you want from the home, it's what experience do you want when you're in the home? And I think that's a huge takeaway for me. I think we got to focus on that. And again, my girlfriend or wife is very into the experiences, and I'm kind of on both sides, but I'm all, there's a lot with that. And then,
there's a natural nexus there to resolve with the two of you, which will be really fun, and honestly, that kind of differential input is like the meaty part of working with couples. It's cool.
Yeah.
As long as it's not like going opposite directions.
No, yeah. And then have the long view, right? I think the industry, everybody, when we're building a building, we're taking some resources and we're taking stuff that, it needs to give back, and we have to have that long view on exactly what we're creating with this. I think that's the other key, and I wish everybody had that built into their mindset when they get into a building project. So I think that's cool. And then also built in the DNA of the industry, right? So the industry's in an evolution. And I think that's kind of, when we think of the DNA, right? The DNA is going to have to change over time as the building codes and as the green building becomes more and more into it. We're going to have this evolution that's going to just continue, and things are going to change. The climate change is going to happen, like we discussed about how that's going to change certain things and how that will just evolve with that. So yeah, that's cool. So yeah.
Yep. I'm optimistic.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to thank the listeners for listening. And if you want to get a hold of Bryan, put some stuff in the show notes and check us out on the website and the blog post. And so thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Stephen.